There's a market that sets your mortgage rate. It decides whether your boss can afford to hire next year. It literally fired a prime minister in 45 days. And there's a 99% chance you've never once thought about it. It's not stocks, it's not crypto, it's not real estate. It's the bond market, and it's worth $130 trillion bigger than every stock market on Earth combined, bigger than the entire global economy. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how it works and why it's quietly running your life, whether you know it or not. Let's start simple. Imagine you need money. You go to a friend and say, "Lend me $1,000. I'll pay you back in 10 years, and every year I'll give you $40 just for the favor." That's a bond. Now replace you with a government. Replace friend with millions of investors around the world. That's the bond market. Governments spend money constantly on hospitals, roads, military, schools, but they almost never collect enough in taxes to cover it all. So they borrow. They issue bonds. The US government right now is $36.7 trillion in debt. The UK £2.7 trillion, Japan over $10 trillion. And the interest payments alone on US debt, $3 billion per day, not paying anything back, just the interest. So how does borrowing this much actually work? 4 terms, that's all you need. Principal, the amount borrowed. Coupon, the annual interest payment. Maturity, when they pay you back. Yield, your actual return. Simple, but here's where it gets interesting. This is the part that confuses even smart people, so pay attention. You buy a government bond for $1,000. It pays you $40 a year. That's a 4% yield. Fine. Now, 6 months later, interest rates in the economy go up. New bonds are paying 6%. Suddenly, your 4% bond looks terrible. Nobody wants it. So, if you need to sell it, you have to drop the price, all the way down to about $800 so that the buyer gets a return that competes with the new 6% bonds. Price drops, yield rises. Now flip it. If rates fall and new bonds are only paying 2%, your 4% bond looks amazing. Everyone wants it. Price goes up, yield falls. This is the iron law of bonds. Price and yield always move in opposite directions. When you hear on the news Treasury yields hit 4.9% today, what they're actually saying is bond prices fell, investors sold. The market is demanding more return to lend to the government. And here's why that matters for you directly. Mortgage rates follow Treasury yields almost exactly. When yields go up, your mortgage gets more expensive. When yields fall, buying a house gets cheaper. In 2021, 3.0, year mortgage rates dropped below 3%, the lowest in American history because the Fed was buying trillions in bonds, pushing yields to zero. Housing market exploded. Then 2022 hit. Yields doubled. Mortgage rates went from 3% to 7% in under a year. Monthly payments on a $400,000 home jumped by over $700. Millions of people were priced out overnight. The bond market didn't ask your permission. It just moved. Here's something wild. There's a simple chart, no algorithms, no AI, no complex models that has predicted every single US recession since 1955, with only one false alarm in 70 years. It's called the yield curve. Normally, long-term bonds pay more than short-term bonds. Makes sense. You want more compensation for locking up your money for 10 or 30 years versus 3 months. The curve slopes upward. But sometimes it flips. Short-term yields rise above long-term yields. The curve inverts. And every time that happens, recession follows, usually within 12 to 18 months. Why? Because when short-term borrowing costs are higher than long-term ones, banks can't make money lending. So they stop. Credit dries up. Businesses can't borrow to grow. Hiring freezes. The economy contracts. The yield curve inverted before 2001, before 2008, before 2020. It inverted again in 2022. The bond market was telling you something. Most people weren't listening. In September 2022, the UK's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, announced a huge package of unfunded tax cuts. The bond market responded instantly. UK government bond yields spiked so fast and so hard that pension funds across the country faced margin calls they couldn't meet. The entire UK pension system was hours away from collapse. The Bank of England had to step in with an emergency bailout. Liz Truss resigned 45 days after taking office, the shortest tenure in British political history. She wasn't voted out. Parliament didn't remove her in any normal sense. The bond market fired her. This is what James Carville, the political strategist who worked for Bill Clinton, meant when he said, "I used to want to come back as the president or the pope. Now I want to come back as the bond market." You can intimidate everybody. Governments can ignore polls. They can spin bad press. They cannot ignore bond yields. When investors lose confidence in a country's finances, they demand higher rates to lend, which immediately makes the debt worse, which scares investors even more. It's a death spiral. And it moves fast. For 20 years, investors relied on one rule. When stocks fall, bonds rise. They moved in opposite directions. The classic 60% stocks, 40% bonds portfolio was considered bulletproof. Then 2022 happened. Stocks fell 18%, bonds fell 13%. At the same time, for the first time in nearly 100 years, the 60/40 portfolio lost money in both halves simultaneously. Why? To understand this, you need one concept: the risk-free rate. The risk-free rate is simply what you earn on a safe government bond. It's the baseline, the floor. Every other investment, stocks, real estate, crypto has to beat it to be worth the risk. When the risk-free rate is 0%, almost anything looks good. Why not buy Tesla? Why not buy Bitcoin? The opportunity cost of speculation is basically zero. When the risk-free rate hits 5%, suddenly safe government bonds are genuinely competitive. Risky assets have to reprice downward to stay attractive. Stocks fall, crypto collapses. This is exactly what happened in 2022 when the Fed raised rates faster than it had in 40 years. It didn't just hurt bonds, it repriced everything. Bitcoin lost 65% that year, not because of anything specific to crypto, because treasury yields went up. The bond market is the gravity of the financial universe. Everything else orbits around it. After the 2008 crash, the Fed did something that had never been done at this scale before. With rates already at zero and the economy still dying, they started buying bonds, directly pumping trillions of freshly created dollars into the market. Quantitative easing, QE. It worked, the economy recovered, so they did it again after COVID. By 2022, the Fed's balance sheet had ballooned from $900 billion to over $9 trillion. They owned nearly a quarter of all U.S. government bonds. The consequence? For over a decade, bond yields were artificially suppressed. Safe assets paid almost nothing. So every investor, pension funds, insurance companies, individuals was forced to take more risk to get any return at all. They bought stocks, they bought junk bonds, they bought real estate. They bought crypto. Every asset price inflated simultaneously. And when the music stopped, when the Fed had to reverse course to fight inflation, everything deflated simultaneously too. Japan took this experiment even further. After their bubble burst in 1990, they cut rates to zero and never really left. Today, the Bank of Japan owns more than half of all Japanese government bonds. They didn't just enter the bond market, they became the bond market. It's a warning about where debt, demographics, and cheap money can lead. And economists argue whether the US and Europe are slowly heading down the same road. So here's what you now know that most people don't. The bond market is the operating system underneath every economy on Earth. It sets your mortgage rate. It determines whether your company expands or freezes hiring. It funds the government programs you depend on or doesn't. It fires prime ministers. It crashes crypto. It predicted every recession for 70 years. And it does all of this through one simple mechanism, the yield. A number that reflects what the most sophisticated investors in the world believe about the future inflation, growth, trust, stability, updated in real time, every second of every day. When yields rise, the world is getting more expensive to borrow. Things slow down. When yields fall, capital flows freely. Things speed up. The next time you see a headline about Treasury yields, or the Fed raising rates, or a government's debt spiral, you won't just scroll past it. You'll know exactly what's happening. And more importantly, you'll know what's coming next. The bond market doesn't just watch the economy, it talks to it. And the economy, whether it likes it or not, always listens.